longer a promise, but a guarantee. Thank you, and I yield.
Thank you so much. I know from my district and Detroit, throughout the 11 other surrounding communities, for us, being the third poorest congressional district in the country, housing is critical. Critical not only for economic stability, but also in providing a safe haven for many of our families across the district. Poverty is complex. A number of factors, including state and federal policy failures and racial and gender inequities, have resulted in so much increased poverty, especially among children. Addressing poverty requires that deep public investment in housing and other infrastructure, healthcare access, and public school investment, coupled with criminal justice reform policies designed to repair a history of segregation and continued exploitation. Less than a year, Madam Speaker, into its enactment, the Opportunity Zone program has already resulted in millions of dollars of wasteful spending and possible corruption. From cities like Chicago, Baltimore, to the city of Detroit, billionaires were able to divert public tax dollars through a tax break called the Opportunity Zone that was supposed to lead to access for housing for our most vulnerable, for communities like mine. And instead, Madam Speaker, what we heard from an investigative report by ProPublica published an article titled, "How a Tax Break to Help the Poor Went to NBA Owner Dan Gilbert." The article contained disturbing details that suggest that opportunity zones that were in the Trump tax scam was designated and had designated census tracts that did not meet the legal criteria, and that political donations and influence had overridden the law to reward donors with generous tax breaks supposedly intended to benefit the poor. Madam Speaker, in the article, billionaire Dan Gilbert's Quicken Loans company donated $750,000 to President Trump's inauguration fund, hosted Ivanka Trump in 2017 for a panel discussion, and last year, Dan Gilbert watched the midterm elections returns at the White House with President Trump, who has called Gilbert, quote, a great friend. In return, Madam Speaker, 3 census tracts in downtown Detroit, where Gilbert owns valuable property, was selected for these large tax breaks through the opportunity zones. According to articles, multiple studies have found that property values in those zones increase because of this tax break. At least one of those census tracts did not meet the poverty requirement for being an opportunity zone and appears to have been designated solely due to political influence. So if we're going to talk about housing justice, we're going to talk about impacting and helping ensure that housing is a human right, we also need to take out the corruption and the political influence. Email exchanges revealed Quicken executives working in concert with the White House to designate tracts with Gilbert's investments as opportunity zones. Madam Speaker, Quicken Loans lobbyists were directly involved in the selection process at every level, lobbying the city, the state, and federal officials to include Gilbert's investment zones in the Opportunity Zone law. So I'm asking us, as we stand for housing for all, that we need to restore public trust in our federal government, which has been eroded with the rules that have been applied unevenly here, and seem to reward the wealthiest and the best connected among us. It appears that a tax program supposedly designed to benefit the poorest among us is now being used to reward political donors and wealthy investors. I've asked the Committee on Ways and Means to investigate the actions by billionaire Dan Gilbert and also asked the Treasury to respond to some of those questions. This is why, instead of these tax breaks for the wealthy and for billionaire-led development, I have proposed the Boost Act. The Boost Act would give $3,000 to $6,000 to families making less than $100,000. It would instantly lift up 45% of Americans living in poverty now. 64 million children would be instantly uplifted out of poverty. The Boost Act would be paid through by repealing the Trump tax scam. In there, you saw not only the opportunity zones, but a number of tax breaks for the wealthy that only benefited the folks that are corporate-led, that have actually been tainting our process to get access to affordable housing in this chamber. So I ask my colleagues, as we propose many fixes to access to affordable housing, to repair some of the historic segregation, zoning laws, and the continued exploitation among many of our neighbors, that we also make sure that we ensure that corruption within our government is not expanding and that we're holding those accountable that is trying to taint that process. So I really appreciate my colleagues, members of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, in standing strong for housing as a human right. Many of the proposals you see forward will only depend on whether or not we can implement it in a way that is just and is very democratic and, again, has really clear oversight. Things like the Opportunity Zone are not the direction that we need our country to go in, and I'm looking forward to introducing legislation that would not only, after repealing Opportunity Zone, but actually use it for land trust, community trust funds, things that were going to be rooted within communities and help those that, again, are seeing home ownership among communities of color decrease, seeing increases between 30 to 50% of their rent or their income going towards rent. I think the way we have to do it is all those folds, not only proposals, but also making sure that we're implementing it in the way that is just and fair. Thank you so much. And I would now like to yield to my good colleague from Texas, Congressman Al Green.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, and I thank the gentlelady for the opportunity to speak. And I commend her for her stellar effort to bring justice to the housing circumstance in our country. I am honored to say that did visit her congressional district, and we had a field hearing that was quite successful. She truly is engaged, involved, and making a difference in her community. Madam Speaker, I was there in 2008 when we had the housing crisis. I remember when